Ben Bartow. I'm calling the
Present.
roll. Sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
Wesley Chudelern.
Here.
Todd Shipley.
Here.
Ron Ellis.
Present.
Jennifer Thomas. Vida Ozude. He's not here today. Deborah Yates.
Okay. I think we have a distinguished guest with us here today before we get into our agenda. Vice President Diane Nicolette is here, and she would like to address the meeting.
Thank you, distinguished committee, and I mean that sincerely. I am representing the Board of Trustees, your trustees for Washoe County School District, and I really do have a big grin on my face because I've been married to my husband, Mark, for 49 years, who's a CPA auditor kind of guy. So I look at each one of you, and I know that you hold many secrets and many talents close to the vest, and I appreciate that. I worked at TMCC for 25 years and learned a great deal through the auditing process. And I came to this realization, and I embrace it fully, is that when the auditors would come, it was a good day. Well, usually it was months, but it was a good few months because they protected us and they helped us improve our practice. And that is always a good thing. And so I am here again representing the Washoe County Board of Trustees to thank you for your dedication, your brilliance, and I mean that sincerely, because this is hard work. It's mind-bending at best, and the funny thing is you enjoy it, so that's the really cool part. And you have helped us with the integrity of our reports, with the integrity of our processes. We have become a great team, and thank you, Kurt, for making that happen, because it truly takes a team to make this happen. Our findings and our processes for improvement have come a long way and will continue, because as you know, just as we changed the acronym from CAFR to AFCR, whatever it is now, it took some regulation to make that happen. So just staying up on that alone and auditing processes as laws and regulations move and change is a big job in and of itself. And so thank you for all that you do, and you do it with a smile on your face, and you do it with heart. You do it for our students, our employees, and our community, and you are appreciated. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming. Appreciate that.
Okay, next up on the agenda would be item 2.01, approval of the minutes from November 4, 2021. So, is there any discussion on the item? Okay, no discussion. Can I get a motion to approve?
Todd Shipley, I'll make the motion to approve the minutes from November 4th of last year.
And a second? All right, motion, vote for approval. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, great. Motion carries. All right, next we have item 2.03, discussion and 2.02. Discussion and possible action to forward to the Board of Trustees for consideration and acceptance the annual follow-up audit of the Washoe County School District Capital Improvement Program performed by Protiviti for possible action. Kirk?
Good afternoon, Kirk Starkey for the record. Chairman Ellis and members of the committee, I'm here this afternoon to present the annual audit follow-up at the Capital Improvement Program audit. Joining us today also is Mr. Adam Searcy. He's the district's Chief Financial Management Officer, Chief Facilities Management Officer, sorry. First, before getting into the report itself, I want to provide some context to the report. Back in 2016, Washoe County voters passed a ballot question, which is known as WC1, that increased the local sales tax by 0.54%, as a way to raise additional funds for the building of new schools and repairing some of our older ones. The district's capital projects department is tasked with the planning, delivery, and oversight of capital projects. This includes those funded by the WC1 monies. Our office was asked to secure a third-party firm to audit the capital improvement program, and around February 2020, Protiviti was selected to complete the project. Protiviti is a global consulting and internal audit firm. They're composed of experts in audit services, engineering, and construction management. The scope of that engagement was all WC1 revenues, bond proceeds, and the associated expenditures. The report resulted in 2 recommendations. The first recommendation sought to have the department standardize its project status communications to the public based upon project type. To accomplish this, the department created a report titled Capital Projects Quarterly Report containing the recommended details. The report is an outward-facing document the department uses to communicate the status of all those major active projects to the public. This reporting mechanism presents pertinent project details, informing the public and management of each project's progress in comparison to the project budget and the timelines. This document is also presented at the Capital Funding Protection Committee, which are public meetings as well. Based upon our review of that process, we considered this recommendation to be fully implemented by the department. The second recommendation found that the department project proposals made to the Capital Funding Protection Committee and the Board of Trustees did not utilize a standard template for communicating project budget proposals. As such, this item sought to have the department standardize that formatting and information in major project proposals to both the Capital Funding Protection Committee and the Board of Trustees. We reviewed the department's presentation materials associated with the new Debbie Smith Career and Technical Academy High School at the February 3rd Capital Funding Protection Committee meeting, and then the subsequent follow-up of February 8th Board of Trustees meeting, and determined the same information was presented at each meeting in the same format while incorporating all the recommended information. As such, we also consider that item fully implemented. In conclusion, we'd like to extend our thanks to Mr. Searcy and his team for their efforts in getting these recommendations implemented in such a timely basis. And at this time, I'd be happy to answer any questions that the committee may have. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I've got a question for,
All right, Todd, please.
obviously this has been an ongoing issue for a number of years. It's the communication issue that's been the problem. Has this been, in response to, number one, posting that on there, has that been successful in solving the communication issues that we've had regarding this? And has there been a response by the public with the postings, and how do we know that?
You read it. What?
If I could, Kirk, for the record, my name is Adam Searcy. I'm the Chief Facilities Management Officer for the school district. I oversee the maintenance as well as the capital projects team. Great question. There's communication's a multifaceted issue, right? We have Facebook postings. We have a committee similar to this. We report at nearly every single board meeting in some form or fashion, and a variety of other mediums with which we communicate the status and plans for our projects. This, at minimum, helped standardize it, because rather than being a little bit scattershot or ad hoc, depending on the developments of the projects, this is a quarterly update that's organized in a consistent fashion that encompasses projects that were maybe underrepresented in our communication. We report and, we are required to receive approvals leading up to the initiation of construction. And then, of course, once the projects are completed, there's maybe like a new school that's opened or something like that. But the in-between period, there are not as many required reporting milestones. That's largely the recommended opportunity that Protiviti saw and said, hey, could you standardize and add some communication in that construction phase, basically. So developing the report was the first step. It's posted on our website. It is shared with our trustees. It is posted also, we have a mailer list. So anyone who is interested in sort of signing up, this is like an opt-in email distribution that we have. I don't have any statistics handy as far as, the number of subscribers or any quantitative feedback as to the effectiveness of it, but I don't know if that's helpful. This is just a little more in-depth description of what we did. To the extent that it worked, it's often in the eye of the beholder. Did you know about what we were doing? Well, there's a lot of information out there these days to pay attention to. We've provided a new and we think clear and consistent opportunity for those who are interested in learning more about all of our active capital projects to do so. And that was the recommendation.
Thank you.
Okay. So
Thanks, Adam.
I just have a quick question. Internal audit performed a follow-up. You're satisfied through your examination and the evidence gathered that these recommendations are fully implemented?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Can I get any further discussion, questions? Okay. Can I get a motion to move this on to the Board of Trustees?
Todd Shipley, I'll make the motion that we accept the report and move it to the Board of Trustees
Okay.
for the action.
Jennifer Thomas, second.
All right. Vote. All those in favor, say aye.
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 All right, motion carries. All right, moving right along. Now we are at 2.03, discussion and possible action to forward to the Board of Trustees for consideration and acceptance the annual follow-up of the Information Technology Organizational Structure and Security Program Audit for possible action. Mr. Starkey, if you would like to lead the discussion, please.
Thank you. I'd like to introduce Paul Casey of our office. Sorry.
Paul IT.
He's from our office.
Audit.
Okay. Paul, you have the floor, please.
Good afternoon, Chairman Ellis and members of the Audit Committee. For the record, my name is Paul Casey, Internal Auditor, and I'm here to present the annual follow-up of the Information Technology Audit. Joining us today from the Office of Information Technology is Chris Turner, Chief Information Officer, IT Security Officer Austin Smith, and IT Director Joe Gallegos may also be present on our virtual platform as their schedules allow. I would like to thank Mr. Turner and his team for their assistance in compiling this report. To provide some background, the Internal Audit Department, in conjunction with sysaudits.com, an information technology audit and cybersecurity consulting company, conducted an audit of the Office of Information Technology. Audit field work began in August 2016 and was completed in October 2016. Several IT governance and risk management programs, such as those established by the National Institute of Standards and Technology and the Center for Internet Security, were used in this report to identify industry best practices. The audit identified opportunities to improve the district's computer security program and weaknesses in resources. The resulting original audit report was accepted by the Audit Committee and the Board of Trustees in November 2016 and resulted in 14 recommendations designed to improve the department's organizational structure and security program. As of the previous year's annual follow-up, there were 7 remaining open recommendations. 2 of the recommendations, 3.3 and 3.4, are now considered fully implemented. As recommended, the department is now performing monthly independent external vulnerability scanning and reporting of district internet systems, and is conducting routine meetings with district leadership to identify and address IT security risks, and is maintaining a risk register for enterprise-based issues. 2 other recommendations, 2.1 and 3.1, sought to have the department adopt certain computer security procedures and to establish written plans related to elements such as network and system activity monitoring, disaster recovery, incident handling, and configuration and vulnerability management. For both recommendations, the department has created draft policies and plans for each of these areas that are expected to be adopted into regulation by next May. As such, these recommendations remain partially implemented. The remaining recommendations, 1.1, 3.6, and 3.7, center around budgetary resources. Although there has been a modest increase in funding for the department since the original audit, no anticipated full implementation date can be established until resources are increased to fully support current district technology needs. As a result, these recommendations also remain partially implemented. Internal Audit would once again like to thank Mr. Turner and the staff for their ongoing diligence in working through the open recommendations as they continue to do so with limited resources and staff. So we appreciate that and wanted to acknowledge their efforts to the committee. At this time, we would be happy to answer any questions from the committee.
Any of my colleagues have any questions? Please.
I do. So, Mr. Turner, how long have you been head of IT? Was it prior to the 2016 beginning of the audit?
No, I arrived here in July 1st, 2020.
Okay,
Okay.
you've inherited a lot.
So my question is, Mr. Turner,
I have more, but go ahead.
I'm
No, go
sorry.
ahead.
No,
No,
you
go-
go ahead,
no, we'll
finish
ping
yours.
pong. No, go back
Okay.
for it.
My big question is, have you asked for the resources you need to fully implement these recommendations? Because, you know, the audit was accepted, we are now in 2022. So you've been on the job roughly 2 years, I would say. Isn't that, you know, I mean, to just say, honestly, partially implemented and to say, we can't tell when we're gonna do it, what are you doing to get the resources that you need to do it?
Thank you for the question, Chairman Ellis. With my arrival nearly 2 years ago and with a change in personnel in the IT security office, we have re-examined the IT audit summary and reprioritized. We went from 14 down to 7, and we continue to endeavor in that direction. And we also have ongoing conversations with the finance department of the district. We recognize that in this space with Nevada living in the lowest 10% of per pupil funding in the country, and with the scarce resources that we have, not to be light about it, but I like to think that my continued advocacy for additional resources and those requests being implemented in small spaces but not in the entirety of the structure of the IT audit is not a commentary on my lack of persuasiveness. It's just that in this organization, it seems like other priorities may have risen higher than IT. But that being said, we are making progress on the IT audit, and with the reprioritization and with the additional personnel, we feel like we're making improvements and positive strides.
So I will cede the floor to you for the remainder of your questions.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Turner.
I heard the comment about modest increases to budget. I'm not sure if that's modest increases to staffing. Do you know what the increase in actual FTE has been since 2016? Or at least, let's say, when the audit findings were first presented?
I do not have those figures available to me.
Do you have a guess, roughly? I mean,
Yeah, based on the current staffing and the staffing at the time, the numbers at the time of the audit were 66,000 per staff, and now it's about 110.
I'm asking about FTE, employees.
The total number of employees?
Right, because money, budget is budget. I mean, we need people in the trenches. We need people to get out and do the work that needs to be done, not necessarily, I mean, granted, that takes money, but.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of concerned about staffing.
So you're right. I consider resources twofold, right? We consider it people, and we also consider it budget. We have seen an increase in the budget since the pandemic. coincided with my arrival. We've responded in ways that are really external. We're supplying more devices to schools, but that is correct. We're not in a space where we have the personnel necessarily to be fully compliant with the IT audit's recommendations. I'm not familiar with the 2016 staffing. We have gone up in the number of FTEs since I've arrived here, but those are temporary solutions that are grant funded and will expire within 2 years. So we have to find a way to retain the people that we've acquired since 2020 and also look at some of the security recommendations.
The one finding that jumped out at me is 3.7, and that has to do with refreshing. And when I read the recommendation, it talked about the refresh included servers, databases, firewalls, things that are critical mass. Can you talk to me a little bit about that and where you feel you're at right now in regard to critical mass?
Yeah, I'm happy to respond to that because the opportunity to look at it on paper and then talk about it it's a great opportunity to explore this. So we do have a 9-year network infrastructure refresh program that is ongoing. It is approximately $5 million per year. It incorporates all the tools that are discussed here, the firewalls, the servers, the network infrastructure, all the wires and the access points in the ceiling. But what's not being accounted for is the addition of the new school buildings that have been constructed since 2016's passage of WC1. So we need to incorporate all those new schools into our ongoing 9-year refresh project. We believe that we're being so efficient that we are shrinking the timeline on the 9-year refresh. And so we think that we can work in those new school buildings once they reach the stage where they need refreshing, where we can infuse them with the network infrastructure refresh.
So as you sit here today, do you have significant concerns in any one particular area? There are occasionally network outages, there are network slowdowns, things of that nature. Care to talk a little bit about that? And I mean, as you sit here today, is there something that you're like, this needs to be addressed and it needs to be addressed relatively soon?
In specific to 3.7 or the entirety of the audit?
Entirety of the audit.
Thank you. Specific to 3.7, I think that the efficiencies that we're realizing in the network infrastructure refresh program will incorporate the entirety of the district, including the new buildings. So I feel like we will reach a space where that's implemented. Overall, in terms of the IT audit, IT people live in a state of constant paranoia. We don't want to be attacked. We don't want our data to be exfiltrated. Those are the things that wake us up and keep us awake. So I always have a level of concern and preparedness in terms of IT security. We have since I've come to Washoe County School District, there's been personnel changes, there's been a leadership change in that department, and there's been not just increased attention to IT security, IT policy writing, IT security operations. It's been a night and day difference in terms of the services and the defensive posture that we've realized with the new person. Very capable staff, probably, to be frank, a little understaffed. We could use a compliance piece in there that will allow the other staff to be a lot more strategic. So that would be my lingering concern with the IT audit and our path forward.
Thank you. I appreciate the work you do. It's extremely challenging, and I understand that. I hope that the board will hear some of the recommendations that haven't been addressed. I understand the ever-competing requirements on the budget, but IT is kind of becoming the lifeblood that drives our district in many ways, and I think it's important that those things are addressed. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Okay, is there any more? Todd?
Are you guys still speaking? I'm not getting,
I think we
Maybe
lost him,
Sal.
Wesley.
yeah.
We can hear you. Ben looks
Yeah, we
frozen.
can hear you all.
Right during the IT audit part too, where we could really,
I have a couple of questions.
yeah, good.
Yeah. Refresh me, how many employees have you got working for
The
you?
chat.
75.
Chat.
75, okay. Just a couple of things. WC1, and I don't recall, that's why I'm asking, did it cover the expenses of IT and staffing to deal with all the new buildings?
So WC1, in all of the new school construction, there is a network, as a component of that, there is a network infrastructure refresh program that we just talked about that's a
But was
9-year
it in
program.
WC1? Was it in the funding?
It's coming out of the capital funding, yes. And then we have additional personnel that are
including
related to
staff?
that.
Okay.
Yeah, we have a project manager that manages that
Okay,
for us.
perfect, that's fine, thank you. It's just refreshing me because I couldn't remember. 2.1, this is only partially implemented. I know you've only been here for 2 years, but policy and plans drive everything that we do. My only concern is that we're putting this off another year. Are we confident that what we've got in place now is going to survive whatever happens in the next year if we don't have proper plans in place?
So we started with one policy when our IT security officer came on board, and that was suspended during the pandemic. It was a password policy. But since we brought our new IT security officer in January of 2021, he's written 7 policies, and we have several others that are going through our internal approval process before they move on to the legal department and district-wide approval. So I feel like we're making great strides in that area.
Okay, I mean, because the response plans are always, how IT in particular fails. If they don't have a good plan, that's, as you know, that's where things fall apart rapidly. So,
Correct.
Anyway, okay, just encouraging to hear that. And then on 3.6, again, going back to resource issues, do we have in that refresh plan, obviously we do, things to address this partial implementation of monitoring the system, which appears to be critical and should have been done. I don't know all the details, but.
So we're in the consideration, this is our area of most significant challenge. We're trying to identify tools that will answer both a network and an endpoint threat protection. We have switched our antivirus tool from a tool that was really endpoint oriented to a tool that looks at the entire enterprise. So that's making us, it's providing for us a much more thorough look at the entire environment. We're very happy with the developments in that area, but that is a challenge for us to look at. We have a couple of tools that look at our network performance, but not threat detection. And we do have the firewall in place. We have the normal enterprise tools that we use, but we don't have. At this point, this is our biggest tool challenge right now is finding something that will use artificial intelligence to go beyond the normal threat detection.
So do you have, let me formulate the question, sorry. This is a huge concern because this is obviously where we're going to get attacked, policy aside. And not having those things in place is problematic. Do we have in your refresh plan enough funds soon enough to solve this problem?
That is an area this is one of our priorities. We're currently investigating the tools and examining the market, and that's our stage right now. We know this is a high priority.
Thank you.
Okay. I just want to make sure that the people that are remoting into the meeting, do you have any questions up there, Leslie or anyone else?
Yeah,
You guys?
actually, can you hear me?
Yep.
We're the 2 IT auditors too, so
They're up there taking notes, so now, tough crowd.
Yeah, so a lot of the questions that were posed I'm sort of going to piggyback off that, Mr. Turner, in regards to the partial implementation, right? 2.1, 3.1, and 3.6, right? So you mentioned a lot of these things are procedures, monitoring, security programs, et cetera, that hasn't been done in fully implemented in a couple of years, which, you know, I would say with everybody, it's alarming, right? What I'm concerned about is because these things, you know, aren't, I wouldn't say a priority, but the resources aren't really dedicated there. What's the risk in your mind of an incident, number one? Number two, what mitigating controls or compensating controls do you guys have in place right now to ensure that these, you know, network outages, contingency plans, lack of monitoring, not a mature security programs, what mitigating controls do you have in place to prevent that from really, you know, being exposed prior to full implementation? Does that make sense where I'm going with that?
I think I'm tracking.
So for example, 2.1, there's a lot of procedures and policies that aren't in place, right? So if an incident occurred as it relates to incident handling and event management plan or some continuous monitoring, something happens, does your team, do they have informal policies and procedures in place to address that? Or are they going to run around not sure what needs to be done? Does the district have a policy and procedure in place to address that?
Yes, that's a space where our policy development is more mature. Somebody's still got. Our disaster recovery plans are more mature than some of our other policies. Those are spaces where you know, just due to natural IT operations, you do encounter outages, and we do case study those after the fact, whether it's through a fault with the vendor or it's a mistake on our part. So we always examine those processes and discuss them at the management level, and then refine our own DR planning. DR planning is not necessarily an umbrella sort of policy and approach. We drill down DR planning all the way to the individual applications. Those spaces for, let's say, for example, our student information system, Infinite Campus, in case there's a data outage there, we are in the process of re-examining our disaster recovery plans for that specific tool, and we're trying to do that across the enterprise, all the applications that we use. Does that answer your question?
Okay, that sort of asked my question. Well, a different example is if there was a breach of PII, personal identifiable information, right?
You froze up, Wesley.
I'll just say this is Microsoft's tool, not right. It's not us. Our network is totally solid.
I'm sorry, but I work on Teams all day long, all night long, across the world, I might add. And, you know, I never encounter this. I have like high-speed internet, so.
We got you back.
Yeah. So different circumstances.
Anyway.
Wesley, you were discussing PII.
Yeah, I was saying that if, for example, there was a breach of PII, right, and right now you guys do not have an established incident plan, how would you handle that, right? Or would you be comfortable handling that?
So, February of 2021, there was an incident here in the district. It was what we qualified as an oversharing incident. It was the way that our SharePoint was set up at the outset. It didn't scale to the level that it needed to in terms of 70,000 users, 62,000 students, and 8,000 employees. and there was an oversharing incident with potential for PII exposure. We checked with our DR planning at the time, involved all the necessary stakeholders in the department, which includes our IT security officer and the project owners, the application owners of that particular tool. And we responded. We also contacted the vendor and involved the vendor at the outset. So with those conversations with the vendor and getting some configuration guidance as well as our own internal processes, we felt like we responded to it in a way that kept the district safe, and then we made sure that we followed up with the proper notifications too. So in case that, in the event that without revealing too much, we involved the appropriate audiences so that people were informed about an oversharing incident. So we feel like this is a space where you don't like to test your systems, right? We don't want PII to be exposed or exfiltrated, but we felt like this was a space where we weren't entirely vulnerable. Well, we were vulnerable, but we weren't entirely exposed. It wasn't Social Security numbers, it wasn't payroll information, it wasn't bank account numbers. It was, some homework that might have been exposed. We felt like this was an entirely valid test of our ongoing operations.
Got it. So is it fair to say that even though a couple of these things are partially implemented, if something did happen, you guys could address the issues?
I would say more assuredly than we would.
You would?
Yeah,
right.
it has.
All right.
Yeah, we're all in a suite of offices right near each other. We're in constant communication. The security team is constantly looking at, logins from foreign countries, permissions, identities. So we feel like our tools are set up in a way that would inform us as soon as possible so that we could be reactive. You brought up PII and you're looking down this data exposure path, but the most recent thinking and the educating I've done on this in this area over the last couple of years indicates that, unfortunately, the idea is no longer that, as little as I like to say it, our data isn't completely infallible, right? So people that think and write on these topics are telling us that it's not if anymore, it's when. So we're trying to prepare for that when as much as possible, looking at all the vectors of vulnerability and trying to shore that up. And that includes the DR planning.
Yep. Perfect. All right.
Anyone else?
I'll stop asking questions. Ben?
Just curious, Paul, I forget your last name, so I'm just going to call you Paul. Good to see you again. How do you guys do these follow-ups every year with Mr. Turner and the IT team? Just you guys get together, it's inquiry.
We get some documentation, some different things from them, like the drafts and things like that. And then in this case, for this follow-up, we've had conversations in both last year and this year with Chris and Austin. I went down there and spoke with them for a little while to ask them some further questions.
Yeah, it seems to be, I'm sorry, I'll jump in. It seems to be a really deliberate and thoughtful process where Paul and Kirk initiate the conversation. It's that time of year again. What could you share with us the developments that have taken place since our last conversation? We share the documents. We respond to the documents in a way that helps inform their process. And I hope that, and then there has been a lot of conversation and meetings around this, if that helps.
No, I appreciate the transparency and all the responses. I think that it's good. I have just more of a comment, I guess, related to some of the backups we mentioned. You talked about, I forget the vendor's name for managing student information.
Infinite Campus.
Related to backups, there you go. And then you've got some cloud providers that are doing backups for some of your data. And I'm just looking ahead on our agenda about the vendor selection AUP that we're going to look at. Just maybe Mr. Turner, just comment on your thought process for selecting vendors, and then maybe later in the meeting we can talk about the procedures in the AUP and if something around IT compliance could be part of that.
So there's a lot that goes into our vendor selection when you reference cloud and a lot of the applications that we use is specific to the student information system, Infinite Campus. A lot of it, the conversation involves both security and resources. So we like using other people's clouds. Infinite Campus is cloud delivered to us. They have very high standards for data privacy and disaster recovery. We've never experienced not a single breach from them. We've never experienced an outage that lasted over 24 hours, as far as I know. So we're really confident in terms of the vendor's attention to our ongoing operations and our need for uptime and our need for recovery. In terms of our disaster recovery, we're increasing our cloud presence so that our redundancy is not only on-prem and on our own hardware, but also up in the cloud. And we feel like without testing the system, which means that something has failed, we feel like we're in a space now with not just our backup system, but also, our cloud backup system, but our new tool that we're using to back up servers that just a right click on a certain resource gets us back in operational. And we just experienced that in a recent outage where we recovered much more rapidly than I anticipated, just because we switched vendors to our server backup system and it just spun right back up. So we're very pleased with that performance.
Okay. Well,
Can I add something really quick? Sorry about that. So to follow Ben's question, you guys are, and Mr. Turner, you mentioned that you guys are a proponent of using cloud services, right? So do you guys obtain or review like a SOC 2 report at all, or review their controls and then understand what your user entity controls are from your perspective?
We go through, so the district has a contract review process, and we kind of apply the same principles, but we don't have our feet in multiple clouds. We primarily use one single cloud here. We have a contract with Microsoft where we can we have storage there and server backups. But other than that, Infinite Campus, the publisher, the student information system publisher, they use, I believe, their Amazon Web Services. So they have their own cloud solutions that they deliver their application to us.
Right, but do you obtain from Infinite Campus a SOC 2 report on a yearly basis on the effectiveness of their control environment? So that way you have a comfort level that they're addressing access, change, etc., SDLC, stuff like that.
So we did go through this process. We had a presentation presented by the IT department and Infinite Campus around their security procedures. I don't know the specifics of the contract language or the standard that you're mentioning, but I can certainly follow up with you about that.
Yeah, if you can, because that's really what we typically would ask for a service organization. It's called a SOC, Service Organization Control Report. That way that an IT, this district can have a comfort that the service provider is protecting our information, providing us with the necessary availability, etc. Ben, you know all about this, right?
Yeah, again, jumping ahead, I think that may be just a great procedure to add to that vendor AUP for later in the meeting if that's up for discussion at all. But that's what I was getting at.
I know we're going off topic, but thanks.
yeah, I think we've had enough discussion. Did you have, Todd? You sure?
Similar to what they just asked, but it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, that was a question I was going to follow up with, is the SOC, Statement of Controls report.
Yep.
Okay, that being said, I think we've discussed this, but really, if there's any more discussion, speak now, or I will entertain a motion. Okay? Motion to move this report on down the line to the Board of Trustees.
By Bartow, seconded.
Okay. Huh? Who made the first motion? Okay.
I didn't get the first.
Thought that was you, sorry.
Oh, okay. So we have the first motion and the second motion. All those in favor, say aye.
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 All right, motion carries. Let's move along to item.
I needed to just
4.
read that we had email public comment on this item from Joe Morabito, and you all got that, so.
Okay. And that's entered into the record as well, right?
That's the wrong item, never mind,
Okay.
sorry.
Okay. All right, moving right along then. 2.04. This is what is this, the attestation for independence?
Yes, sir.
Okay. We're all familiar with this, pretty standard.
I'll run through it.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Starkey.
Thank you. Kirk Starkey for the record. Our department operates under the standards of the Institute of Internal Auditors, or the IAA for short. IIA Standard 1110 requires me to confirm to the board annually the organizational independence of the internal audit activity. As part of your packet is the submitted report that confirms the structure of our office that properly allows the department to fulfill its responsibilities by operating in an environment that maintains our organizational independence. The agenda item is for possible action, and with your approval, I'm seeking to submit the report to the Board of Trustees for their acceptance. Thank you.
Okay, is there any discussion or questions regarding this report? Okay, can I get a motion to approve?
Todd Shipley, I'll make the motion to approve.
Okay.
the
Second?
report.
Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Motion carries. We will forward the report. Number 2.05, internal audit's role in the charter school monitoring process. Mr. Starkey?
Kirk Starkey for the record again. I wanted to use this agenda item to inform the committee of our department's role in the charter school monitoring process. As a sponsor of charter schools, Washoe County School District is statutorily required to monitor both the instructional program performance and the business requirements of each of the 7 sponsored schools and ensure compliance with Nevada law and also the terms of the various charter school agreements. The monitoring involves multiple district departments, not just ours. There's a lot of district departments involved. But our department assists in the effort by monitoring the financial activities of the schools. This includes reviewing the financial statements, bank statements, inventory records, grant files, and budget records. The results of these activities are incorporated into an annual report that's prepared for each school and is presented to the Board of Trustees, and it later gets submitted to the Nevada Department of Education. A sample of the reporting template that our office is involved in preparing is in your packets. It kind of gives a framework of what we're looking at. The agenda item is basically an information-only item, but since it's a mandated requirement and it encompasses a portion of our audit activities during the year, I just want to make you aware of the efforts that our department incurs during this process. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to entertain them on this one.
Any questions?
It's kind of just a heads-up item of what we were.
Okay. Any discussion? It's not asking for action, so hearing none, we'll move on to the next agenda item, 2.06. Discussion and possible action to provide direction to the chief auditor to revise board policy 9170, internal audit department to remove the reference to conformance with generally accepted government auditing standards, or Yellow Book, and forward the revision to the board policy committee for consideration for possible action. I understand we had some public comment on this, which we received.
You received an email from Joe Morabito, sorry
Okay.
about.
And I understand that Mr. Starkey had some correspondence and
Correct.
explained to him the situation and what the proper standards are.
Yes, sir. Again, Kirk Starkey, for the record, I'm sorry, this is the part of the agenda where it's gonna be me talking for a little bit, but bear with me. This agenda item is an action item, and I'm requesting your approval to seek to revise our board policy 9170. That policy essentially governs our department. In attachment A on the screen right now, you can see there's a highlighted area in the policy that I'm referring to. Specifically, this policy requires our department to follow two sets of professional standards, both the IIA standards, which are referred to as the Red Book, and the GAO standards, the Yellow Book. I'm unsure of the genesis behind the reasoning for why we're utilizing both standards, and although following both sets of standards really is not overly burdensome, I believe, though, our office would be better served operating under a single set of standards for efficiency purposes. After evaluating the types of activities our department engages in, it's my opinion that operating under the IAA standards, the Red Book, are the most appropriate for our operation. In addition, our department, we sometimes also engage in consulting or advisory services under Board Policy 9170. These services are not encouraged by the Yellow Book, but the Red Book is okay with them because they're seen as adding value to the organization. Also, when I started looking at the situation a little bit more, I want to see what our other similar school districts may have been utilizing. So I looked at there was a recent survey sent out by the Council of the Great City Schools in this area. And the Council of the Great City Schools is a membership organization comprised of our nation's largest or large urban school districts. And our district is a member of the organization. So it was kind of easy to parrot upon what that organization did, a survey in this area, and utilize their results. As you can see on the attachment B, there's basically 21 schools. Of those 21, 15 of them utilize the Red Book, 5 of them utilize Yellow, which is the GAO standards, and then there's us, which is the lone soldier there with the Orange Book. And before going too much into it, I contacted the various Yellow Book users, those school districts, to see why they do what they do. Maybe there was something I was missing, so in order to be thorough and complete, I wanted to hear their side of the story. Unfortunately, the results for those discussions were essentially they have no idea why they do this. It's just always been done that way. So that didn't really help. But yeah. In summary, the Red Book standards still would require adherence to professional auditing standards, and they also include a code of ethics. There will be no decrease in the professionalism of our work. We'll still have adherence to our standards, and the reliability of the results and the independent procedures performed by our department would still be relied upon. So basically, at the totality of our activities and this talking with the other school districts, I'm seeking your consent to seek to revise our department policy to remove the requirement to adhere to basically the GAO standards and utilize the IAA standards. Thank you for your time, and again, if you have any questions, I'll be happy.
Any questions? So I
Go ahead,
please.
go ahead, Ron.
No, you go right ahead.
In a nutshell, 2 sentences, what's the significant differences between the two?
The biggest difference, I would say, in my opinion, the Red Book is more of, it contains the standards and the factors and criteria of how to not just do an audit, but also run an audit shop, an entity. That's the biggest thing. Whereas the Yellow Book are fantastic with handling and opining on how to do your audit procedures for certain audits. But the Red Book has a little bit of both, and I think that really helps us out. And also the consulting side of things. I don't want to, with the Yellow Book, if we were just straight Yellow Book and we're doing some of the interactions we do with other district departments, I think independence would come into play under Yellow Book standards because they're so strict in that format, where Red Book is more of the value that's provided to the organization is seen significantly.
So, and just to clarify for the record, I know the answer to this, but the IIA standards are more of a voluntary, adherence to the standards. The Yellow Book is really was set out, to my understanding, for entities that take advantage of federal grants, which the school district obviously does. So why wouldn't the Yellow Book be more appropriate in certain circumstances?
No, that's a great question. with audits, if we were to have to do an audit with, let's say, a purely grant-funded department under those circumstances, it probably would be beneficial Yellow Book wise. There's no problem there, and we could utilize that during that specific audit. The other thing is when the outside accountants come in to do our annual audit, it's all Yellow Booked, so that's a significant, as far as the grants go, they handle a significant portion of that review.
Okay. And then on page, there's another portion to this, just besides, there's under the quality assurance program.
Yep.
So you're still required under the Red Book to maintain a quality assurance program. I believe it's like every 5 years is the standard. So this item number 9 here would be redacted to remove the reference to the Yellow Book.
Correct.
Okay. And then finally, do we have any idea as to the ranking of the audit departments that use Yellow Book versus the Red Book? If I look at these, and how do these departments compare, as far as like student-wise, to Washoe County School District?
No,
I see Montgomery County is 160,000, Orange County, Florida, is a Red Book district, so.
No, that's a great question too. And I should have mentioned this, the answers that are supplied through this Council of Great Cities School Survey, it's all voluntarily provided information by the various schools. None of it has been verified. It's just what that individual school who was contacted is reporting. So there is some, lack of a better word, blind faith on the numbers that are listed up there. However, they do, where this one is sent to, it's all the chief auditors of these different schools are the ones responding to these questions. So I put a little professional faith into those responses. But as far as evaluating, let's say, direct comparisons between these districts and ours on students, number of schools, FTEs within the organization, no, I did not do that.
Okay. And I don't think that's important. I was just curious as to, is there a specific to the internal audit department, are there any school districts whose internal audit departments would be ranked higher? Kind of like a who you got type thing.
Gotcha. I don't know. I don't
Okay.
know. Like when I was contacting the Yellow Book, different districts, I was hoping to get something, a little nugget of information as to why, but
Okay.
no.
Well, any more discussion, questions?
I had a question.
Sure.
It might be naive. So I hear you say that you want to move away from the dual, which Yellow Book, Red Book. Under, say, 9A, you're removing the Yellow Book references, but I don't see references to the Red Book.
Oh, it would be you would still say, so like 9A, for instance, it still says the Institute of Internal Auditors International Standards for the professional professional
Is
practice.
that an A?
That's an I. 9A, so it'd be if you,
Okay, so you're not removing this section that says the Institute of Internal Auditors.
correct.
Okay, so I was
Yep.
confused because it was highlighted, so I thought
Oh,
all
my
highlighted
apol-
stuff
oh,
was being removed.
My apologies. No,
Okay.
it's basically, those are the
Just
two.
redact the Yellow Book references.
Correct.
Thank you.
Correct.
Okay. Any more questions?
And Kirk, you're just looking approval from us to make that recommendation that be done, right? Is that what you're asking for?
Correct. So what would happen
You
is.
gotta write another memo and we've gotta approve it at the next meeting kind of thing?
Well, what would happen is with your approval, we would we would edit, let's say, this policy, then it would go to, there's another committee called the Board Policy Committee, which is where the trustees are basically that committee, and it goes to them with the edits, I think it's twice, back and forth, and then if okayed through that process, then it would go to the Board of Trustees at official meeting for public comment and also board approval at that time.
Okay. Anybody who is dialed in, do they have any comment? And then we'll get a motion.
No comment.
Okay. Just want to make sure you guys aren't forgotten up there. Okay, no further discussion. I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion, Todd Shipley, that we direct Kurt to make the changes to the policy based on his presentation to changing from the Red Book from the yellow book, red book, to just the red book, correct?
Yes.
Under board policy 9170.
Yes.
Long.
Do I get a second on that motion? Okay. Okay. And all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Motion carries. Move on. All right, next item, 2.07. It's presentation on the proposed capital improvement program, professional services for audit, information only. Okay.
All right. Chairman Ellis and members of the committee, Kirk Starkey for the record. This is an informational item, but as you may recall at our last meeting, I mentioned there was a possibility the district could be seeking an additional audit of the capital improvement program, but it would be focusing upon professional service providers. This includes architects, engineers, design firms. The proposed scope and procedures are part of your packet and on display on the TV. And I believe the procedures capture the intent of the project request. But for context, the audit you previously heard about earlier this afternoon had a focus closely tied to construction costs. This proposed audit would close the loop on the other side of the equation to capture the activities of the architects and engineers. And for a little more clarity too, this project is planned to be an agreed upon procedures review, specifically not a technical audit, with the objective of determining department compliance with Nevada law and WCSD policies when we're engaging professional service providers on district capital projects. The Capital Funding Protection Committee and the Board of Trustees have approved funds for the review, and the next step is we would plan to seek quotes from at least 3 different firms as far as performing the work, and then we would go from there. I will definitely keep you informed of the status of the project, but it was kind of a heads up item of this is a project that will be in theory going forward with. Thank you.
Okay. So this was just informational, correct?
Correct.
All right, moving right along. I think we have our hotline report next. And this, again, does not require any action by the committee. So, Mr. Starkey, you have the floor. It's the Kirk Starkey Show.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Here's another one. Chairman Ellis and members of the committee, Kirk Starkey for the record. This item, as Mr. Ellis stated, is informational only, but we like to present it to keep track of all the different cases. As you know, our department administers the district's report fraud, waste, and abuse hotline program. This agenda item and on your screens is basically the worksheet we use to show the status of the reported cases since our last committee meeting. We utilize the worksheet to report the complaints received, so we track them all, and then also the disposition of all the different complaints. The worksheet's divided into 2 sections. The top portion of the section shows the status of the cases that were previously reported to you at the last meeting and that were still considered open and active, while the bottom portion is all the new ones we have received since the last committee meeting. But since our last meeting, we've received 21 new cases. It's basically a significant increase in cases since in comparison to past activities. Of these new cases, 8 were referred to we referred them to the appropriate department for investigation. 8 were closed that we received because they were basically outside the program scope, or there's instances where when they're anonymous and you don't have enough information to start an investigation. 2 we found that did not have merit. 1 was initially found to have merit and was addressed, and there's 2 cases from our new cases that are still open and we're working. We'll continue on that sheet. There's 4 open cases. We'll continue to work all 4 open cases, and at the next committee meeting, you'll get the update on all the open cases. Thank you.
All right, moving right along to item 2.09. Status update on the activities of the Internal Audit Department to include current projects on the Internal Audit Department audit plan for fiscal year 2022.
All righty. Kirk Starkey for the record. This is also an info and discussion item, so please don't hesitate to interrupt if you got any questions during this, no problems. Up on the screen is our project status worksheet. It's a little different than our last meeting, I believe, but there's a couple things on there I wanted to bring to your attention, make you aware of. At the top, under charter schools, you'll see that there's one called quarterly monitoring. Due to some continued deficiencies we noted during our monitoring process of Bailey Charter School, we added these quarterly contacts to an attempt to provide a little more oversight and a little more attention to Bailey Charter School in an attempt to remedy some of the compliance issues that were noted in the recent monitoring of that school. I also made a mistake once I printed this and attached it, so I need to correct that right now. There's the sick leave bank audit that we did a little while ago should be on there under the audit follow-ups. It's not listed, but not listed as being initiated. It will be started when the bargaining unit agreements have come to conclusion. The reasoning for that is some of the recommendations in that report were related to the results of those bargaining units. We'll have to wait till that occurs to initiate the review. It would be if we just did it on a timeline, I don't think it would be beneficial to anyone on the committee, but we will get to it. The other one is under the student activity funds, there's a long list of requested projects, which is good because we're getting input from management and principals at the school. They're asking for audits of these activity funds. In order to be responsive to these requests, I'm proposing we're going to focus on getting these audits completed first. And as also part of it, as you're likely aware, there'll be a new superintendent starting with the district for the new fiscal year. As a result, there may be some changes that go on, so I would rather focus on these student activity funds because of the volume of the requests and the significance of trying to get those completed, and then allow the new superintendent a year to get in place, and then we'll do a new risk assessment, and following that we'll have a new audit plan that would be coming your way based upon what happens there. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions you may have on that.
Anybody? Yeah.
So Kirk and I did talk about one of the audits that they had performed at one of the schools. And some of the issues that are reoccurring would be very beneficial and learning opportunities for the school sites if that information was shared. I don't think many of them go digging to look for the audits. They're just too busy. So I had suggested that might be a wonderful learning opportunity. I don't know if that's something that staff can implement, but to try to codify some of these repetitive type findings. Kirk, go ahead.
No, that's a great question, and thank you. And the plan, the business office recently was authorized a new position in the accounting office, and that position was focusing on student activity funds partially for this reason. That position will be able to provide training to the schools, which is basically the bookkeepers, help the bookkeepers in this area, train them up and alert them to certain significant findings that we keep seeing in these activity fund audits. Also, we're going to work in conjunction with there's area superintendents that are over various schools, and with those area superintendents, we're going to give them kind of like a top 10 list, for lack of a better way of saying it, of the findings that we keep seeing over and over at the schools, especially at the high schools, because of the volume of transactions and the dollar amount. They are significant, and so the superintendents, when the area superintendents, that is, when they meet with their different principals, will be informing them of these are items to be a heads up on and pay attention to.
This is a little off topic. Off the top of your head, do you have a sense of the amount of money that would run through a typical high school? I mean, it's significant, and I'm not sure the public understands the amount of money that runs through these accounts. And I'm not talking about average balances. I'm talking about the amount of money that would go from point A to the end of the school year.
That's a great question. I don't. It's a big number because there's the ins and the outs. And if you just took a snapshot of a school at the end of a year, let's say if someone's doing an audit of it, you would just get a balance, and that doesn't do it justice of what's actually flowing through and flowing out.
I think
it's very significant.
I think an idea of volume would be, like in the casino industry, we have, coin in and drop that tells us, how much money churned through the place. And I think it's important to get an understanding of how much what the materiality level is on these things.
We are-
And what's the metric that we measure materiality for?
So Kirk, I had an opportunity to work at one of the tiny high schools. I would venture to say, well, I ran easily over 250,000, and this was one of the tiny high schools.
It's very significant, and we are going to, at the end of the audit reports for these school audits, we have started adding, it's called Attachment A, which will show the different class accounts. It'll show the balance, but it'll have the beginning balance, the ending balance, but it'll also have the income, the expenses, and then any transfers that could be flowing. So it will be apparent as you do, especially for this committee, you will see in the report of what is going through.
Okay, one more question for me, and it's a simple question. When it says requested, who requests these audits? Or who can
Oh.
request?
Okay, no, that's a great question. That one specifically? What-
Any of them that
Oh,
say requested?
It's
Who
a-
generally,
It's coming from basically leadership, upper management, area superintendents, I would say management, or some of them have been principals that would call. Let's say you would be a new principal taking over a high school. They would. We usually, Jeannie's great about it. We get emails about who's transferring amongst the schools, assuming new positions. Send out emails, say, hey, congratulations on the new position. Here's your last. It's a heads up to them. Here's the last audit report that was performed at the school. If you're interested in an audit of these funds, please reach out to us. And several of them have taken us up on it, which is great.
Yeah.
I think so.
okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any discussion from you guys dialing in? Okay, any
Nope.
more discussion?
Good.
So this was just an informational item, correct? Excellent report. And I think last but not least, we have the, do we need to take any action on the actual report that we have in front of us, Innovations High School? No. Okay. That just goes on. All right, so last but not least, presentation of the Audit Committee annual calendar for information.
Kirk Starkey for the record. This item, as you know, this is typically at the end of our committee meetings. It's informational only. It's kind of a high-level preview of matters that will be upcoming at the next committee meetings. We have also the proposed, these are the planned dates of the next meeting, and it'll be, that are listed there, kind of give you a heads up with your calendars. If you have any items for inclusion that you would like to add, or if certain dates don't, are just not suitable with your schedules, don't hesitate to give us a heads up. It's not a problem. So thank you.
Can I add something,
Yeah,
Kirk? And, this is a democratic decision, right? But I was hoping, the dates work, but the timing, right, the 3:30, if everybody's okay, I would request that we push it back to 4 so I could really get to these meetings, because my days are pretty packed till about that time on Thursdays. And I know we traditionally do 3:30, but if we could push it back by half an hour, that would help me out a lot. But, I'll leave it up to the committee and everybody else to weigh in on that.
No, that's a great one. Thanks, Wesley. These are set ahead of time in our board services department. There's a lot of calendaring. We have a lot of committees within the district, and it's, how do I say, there's a lot of time slots that
Wesley.
are already kind of spoken
Wesley,
for and
mute your mic.
and are sealed off, let's say. But I hear you. I don't know if I can adjust, let's say, the next 2 meetings. That might be kind of tough, but let's say the third and fourth quarter, we might be able to work something out. We'll speak to the board services department and give a heads up, see if we can do it. If that works with,
Yeah, and I don't want to
Yeah.
impact the other committees too, so.
Yeah,
no problem.
members.
yeah, I'm fine. Time slot,
We'll see what we,
half hour either way.
okay. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Closing items. Jean, do we have any more public comment?
No, there's no more public comment.
Can I make one?
Please.
Thanks. I'd like and he's not going to like this, but for public comment, I'd like to offer a big congratulations out there to Mr. Matt McMahon of our office. He's sitting out there. He just passed the CIA exam, and it's huge. So I just wanted to pass along a great job to him. And Thank you.
Congratulations.
You did a good job.
Does he get a bonus for that, Kirk?
More work?
No, I think,
It's more work.
I think that money's going to be devoted to IT from now on. Sorry, IT versus auditing, IT wins.
Thanks, Ron.
Sorry, pal. It's just the way it is.
And also, I'd like to thank Jennifer, Ron, Todd, and Ben. You've all agreed to serve another 2-year term on the committee. Appreciate it. I know it's you're giving up time during your day and the excellence you bring to this committee. So thank you much for agreeing to re-up. Many thanks, and thanks to everyone for this evening. Thank you.
Has it been 2 years already?
Fast.
Wow, time flies. All right. Does that cover all the public comment stuff? We're good to move on to number 3.02, announcement of next meeting. I think it says November 3rd, 2022, and it will be at August 11th. I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead. August 11th, 2022. I had one job. One job. August 11th, 2022 will be the next meeting at 3:30 p.m. Okay, but if we can move it, we'll work out for. We'd love to see you, Wesley. And then finally, I guess that brings us to the adjournment of the meeting. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Mr. Chairman, Todd Shipley, I'll make the motion to adjourn.
Okay.
I'll second it to Reed's.
Everybody in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Nope. Motion carries.
Thank you all very much.